Welcome to another episode of Too Close to Home, the series where we dig up creepy stories, haunted places and mysteries from our very own patrons' hometowns. This episode we're looking at Mitchell, Tiffany, Jade, Dan and A. And do we have some good stories in store for you five? If you want us to dig up stories from your area, head on over to Patreon and join our Too Close to Home tier. Thank you everyone for supporting us, and now it's time to hit those lights, sit back and enjoy. Mitchell Fisher, Glendale, Arizona. Mitchell has asked us to look at his hometown of Glendale, Arizona. For you, Mitchell, we are looking at a particularly sad unsolved murder case. It all began on the evening of May 26, 1996. Best friends Diana Shawcroft and Jenny Luth planned to walk to the corner convenience store in the vicinity of 55th Avenue and Camelback Road in Glendale, Arizona. Diane had told her sister, Tina, who they both lived with, that they planned to buy cigarettes and a soda. Initially, when the pair did not return as expected, there was no cause for concern, as 20-year-old Diana and 19-year-old Jenny were known to be adventurous, and it was Memorial Day weekend, and Diana's sister figured they just got caught up in the celebrations. However, by the following morning, when the two girls did not arrive back home, Tina began to worry and panic began to set in. Tina contacted family members who reported their disappearance to Glendale Police Department. At first, the police thought the girls might just be out partying for the weekend, but when they failed to return, officers were dispatched to where the girls were last seen. The convenience store clerk confirmed they had purchased cigarettes and a soda, and he saw them outside the store smoking at around 7 p.m, where they stayed for some time before being picked up by a man in a truck. The man was described as Caucasian in his 30s, with a blonde mullet hairstyle and wearing a blue denim jacket. The truck was described as an older model Chevrolet with faded blue paint. An extensive search was launched for the girls by both the family and the police, and thousands of flyers were distributed both locally and in neighbouring states, and a massive media campaign ensued to try and locate the girls. The search for Diana and Jenny became the largest ever in Arizona history. But despite following up hundreds of leads, the girls couldn't be found, and days, nights, weeks, then months passed with no credible leads. 3 months after Diana and Jenny's disappearance, and over 100 miles away from where they were last seen, two bow hunters made a gruesome discovery in a remote desert location on Dugas Road in Yavapai County. They found two badly decomposed bodies lying on top of each other on a small rock ridge, hidden out of sight in an area only accessible by trucks and 4x4 vehicles. Police confirmed the remains were that of Diana and Jenny, and they had been murdered. Although due to decomposition in the Arizona heat, no actual cause of death was given, just that Diana's body was on top of Jenny's on the ledge. Police were convinced the killer must have known the area well due to the placement of the bodies, and that they were certain the killer was either extraordinarily strong or that more than one person was involved, as it was known that Jenny was very protective of Diana, and she would have aggressively fought for her life. After the discovery of the bodies, the case received more media coverage and a reward was ordered for information. Both families remained dedicated to finding out who murdered the two best friends. In December 1996, the Shawcroft family planned a memorial at the desert site where Diana and Jenny were found. Two beautiful redwood crosses standing 3 feet tall were hand engraved with their names, and the words "I love you" were cemented into the ground. In addition, a wood photo frame encasing the girls' photographs was placed at the foot of the crosses. In the years following Diana and Jenny's murder, the police monitored the site where their bodies had been recovered, especially on dates that may have had some significance to the killer, such as birthdays, the date they disappeared, and the date they were located. They wanted to see if the murderer would return, as many do. Unfortunately, there was no evidence the site had been visited by anyone other than family. However, all that changed in September 2000 when police discovered the girls' photographs had been removed from the wooden frame and the frame discarded at the foot of the crosses. Had the killer returned? Quite possibly. Police were certain it was unlikely someone just stumbled across the memorial in such an isolated area and took the photographs for no reason. However, despite extensive media coverage and even a segment on Unsolved Mysteries, the identity of the killer remains unknown to this day. Sadly, both of Diana's parents and Jenny's father passed away, never knowing who killed their daughters. A. Jamestown, Tennessee. Our next patron asked us to look at Jamestown, Tennessee, and they wish to remain anonymous, so we'll call them A. When doing some research into Jamestown, Tennessee, we found a long-standing legend about the long-abandoned Old Pine Haven school building. It's the sad story of a boy who used to attend the school who was constantly bullied by the other children. One day he took a bathroom break and found himself alone in the boys' toilet block. As he washed his hands, one of the bullies walked in and decided to play a trick on him. The bully called over his mates and they snuck up on the boy and pushed him from behind. The poor boy hit the mirror with his head so hard that it cracked and a shard of glass lodged into his neck. He turned to the bullies holding his neck as blood gushed from it and he fell to the ground. The bullies watched on in horror as the boy gasped for air and died from his wounds in front of them. The bullies panicked, and fearing they would be held responsible for his death, they tore up the floorboards and stuffed the boy's lifeless body into a hole beneath the sink, before replacing the boards and cleaning up. It is said that if you dare to enter the abandoned building's boys' toilet, and stand at the sink and look in the mirror, you will see the dead boy lurking behind you. Another take on this legend is that the student who was killed was a girl who died in the girls' toilet block. The girl was not a popular student and had few friends, and like the boy, she was picked on by the other students. One day after school, she went to the bathroom to fix her hair, placing her study books on the floor beside her, when one of her bullies walked in and, totally unprovoked, picked up one of the study books and hit the girl on the head with it. The blow cracked her skull and she fell to the floor, hitting her head on the sink, causing a fatal injury. The bully dropped the book and ran out of the bathroom, leaving the girl dead on the floor. That evening, the night janitor found her, but fearing she may be blamed for her death, instead of alerting someone, she dragged the body through the halls of the school and hid it in the basement, where it remains to this day. There is also another interesting story from Jamestown, Tennessee that we wanted to include, and that is of Billy Dean Anderson. Billy Dean Anderson was a criminal who became something of a folk hero in Tennessee after he evaded the FBI for over 4 years. Billy was born on July 12, 1934, and grew up in the Pall Mall area of Fentress County, Tennessee. He wasn't a troublesome child, and at the age of 18 volunteered as a preacher at Wolf River Methodist Church in Pall Mall. He worked several jobs ranging from an artist to a farmer. Billy's appearance was distinctive because he had a large scar across his nose and the left side of his forehead. He also had other surgical scars over his body and reportedly wore braces on both legs. But things changed in June 1959 when Billy and 2 friends carried out an armed robbery at a drive-in theatre in Jamestown, Tennessee. Billy shot at the theatre usher when he had no money to hand over, but intentionally missed him. He served a 4-month jail sentence for his part in the hold-up, but it seemed it didn't deter him from offending again. In October 1962, Billy brandished a shotgun on a group of state police troopers in Jamestown, which resulted in an officer being shot. Billy soon surrendered after he himself was shot twice in the stomach by the other officers. For this offence, he received a 10-year prison sentence, but only served 4 years due to being a model prisoner. When he was released, Billy moved to Muncie, Indiana. However, he was banished from the state with a suspended prison sentence after he committed armed robbery. But Billy's crime spree continued, and when he returned to Tennessee, he was jailed again for a standoff with a sheriff. In 1970, he returned to Muncie, where he pulled a gun on a customer at a garage he was working at. This time, he was sentenced to a 10 to 25-year sentence at the Indiana State Prison. Again, Billy was paroled after just 2 years and moved to Morgan County, Tennessee, where he was arrested for non-fatally shooting a deputy sheriff in Morgan County. He was jailed for this offence and various others on January 15, 1974, and sent to Morgan County Jail. In December of the same year, Billy and a fellow prisoner escaped, and in January 1975, he was placed on the FBI 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list. Billy evaded police for over 4 years by hiding in the mountains of Pickett County, Tennessee, where the locals were sympathetic to him and helped him to stay hidden. He earned the name the Mountain Man. Billy lived in a cave that he had accessed through a 3-foot opening on the side of a hill, from which he lowered himself 20 feet into the home he had made for himself. But eventually a tip-off led the FBI to Billy, as he was leaving the home with his 75-year-old mother. As he attempted to run away, the state troopers shot him twice in his lower back. The bullet exited through his stomach, and Billy died instantly. Since his death on July 7, 1979, Billy Dean Anderson has taken on legendary status, and there are conflicting reports about how he died, with some believing he was only caught because he got tangled in a barbed wire fence. Others believe he stopped running because officers tricked his mother into calling his name. Billy was a gifted artist and produced over 300 paintings whilst in prison. He was also an accomplished woodcarver, and brushes and paint were found in his cave hideout in Pickett County. His name lives on, but it seems Billy Dean Anderson could have been remarkable for so much more than just a petty criminal. Bristol, United Kingdom. Bristol is a city in South Gloucestershire, England, and it's a place that is steeped in history. It is also the place where our Patreon Dan lives, and for Dan we are going to look at one of its many ghost stories. Driving in or out of Bristol city centre usually requires a trip down the M32 motorway, and perched high above the stretch of road is a bright yellow mansion-looking building that is hard to miss. However, despite it being one of Bristol's most recognisable landmarks, few will realise its past and alleged haunting. The story of the house started back in the mid-16th century when Richard Berkeley built a house on a hill he called Stoke Lodge. In 1736, the lodge was inherited by Norborne Berkeley, who rebuilt it in a Gothic style and renamed it Stoke Park. He also had the grounds landscaped, and carriage drivers and woodland walks were laid out, as well as a rotunda and a large pond. But tragedy struck in 1760 when Berkeley's 17-year-old niece, Elizabeth Somerset, was killed in a riding accident. Now, there are a couple of versions of her accident. One says that she was riding her horse down the hill, leading from the house, when her horse got his foot caught in a rabbit hole, whilst another claims the accident was caused by her carriage tipping over. But whatever the cause, she definitely died, and an obelisk in her memory was erected in the grounds. When Berkeley later went bankrupt in 1768, he fled to the US, and Stoke Park passed to his sister, the Dowager Duchess of Beaufort, who changed its name to the Dower House. After her death in 1799, the building was occupied by a string of tenants, but was eventually sold in 1909 to the Rev. Harold Burden, who with his wife Catherine, converted it into a hospital for children with mental health issues and learning difficulties, which was later taken over by the NHS. And in 1939, the obelisk collapsed after being struck by lightning. Then in 1968 came the most devastating change of all to the landscape. The construction of the M32 went right through the grounds, directly below the Dower House. The tranquility it had once enjoyed was shattered forever. Over the years, many children travelling with their parents along the motorway would have been told the tale of the poor woman who rode her horse down the hill and fell off, breaking her neck. And the legend was exaggerated further into the woman being buried in the woods along with her horse, and that she haunted the area, riding her horse around the grounds of the large imposing house on the hill. Nowadays the house is painted bright yellow, and following the closure of the hospital, has been converted into flats. The pond has been partially restored. However, the area is still plagued by rumours that it is haunted, and visitors claim to have heard galloping hooves as they walk through the now public grounds. And a few years ago, a gardener claimed that when doing some work on the grounds, he saw the apparition of a little girl wearing a petticoat and a straw hat, and when he called her, she came over and walked straight through him. Princeton, Texas. Tiffany is from Princeton, a city in Collin County, Texas. We found a little local legend that we hope you enjoy, Tiffany. It's the haunted prisoner of war camp. During World War II, Texas had nearly 70 prisoner of war camps, almost twice as many as any other state. Some were huge and housed thousands of prisoners, whereas others were smaller with less than 100 inmates. By the end of the war, there were approximately 78,982 enemy prisoners being held captive in Texas alone. One of those smaller camps was located in Tiffany's hometown of Princeton. The town already had a facility built to be used as a migrant work camp that was complete with bunks and accommodations that could easily be repurposed to house the German prisoners. And because Princeton at the time was a small farming community, it was perfect for prisoners, as there was nowhere for them to hide should they try to escape. The facility opened for prisoners in 1954 and was known as Branch Camp 2. The regime at the camp would have been harsh, with just the basics for everyday life, featuring barrack-like shelters with beds and wood stoves, as well as 139 concrete slabs to pitch tents along with shared washing and toilet facilities. Inevitably, deaths occurred here. At the end of the war, the prisoners were shipped back to Germany by way of France and Britain so they could help repair the war-damaged Europe countryside. And Branch 2 closed. Just 8 months after it opened, it returned to its original purpose as a migrant worker camp until it closed for good in 1969. Today the camp welcomes visitors and has been turned into a community park, although one of the concrete footings still remains as an eerie reminder of the prisoners who were once incarcerated there, and the old rusting water tower can still be seen in the distance. It is the water tower that holds a tragic legend. It's said that not long after the prisoners had left, and things started getting back to normal after the war, a young cheerleader climbed up to the tower and jumped off the top, killing herself. It is said she was heartbroken after breaking up with her boyfriend. Legend has it that if you drive up near the tower at night, park up and turn your engine off, then flash your headlights 3 times, you will hear the sound of a woman crying out for help, followed by a thud on the top of your car as the ghost of the cheerleader falls to her death. As you can imagine, the old prisoner of war camp and the water tower are favourite spots for teenagers and young adults to go to test out the theory. I wonder if you've ever tried it, Tiffany. Ebbw Vale, South Wales. Ebbw Vale is located in the South Wales Valleys in the United Kingdom. At one time it was part of the coal and iron mining community, and today the area contains several disused pits left over from those days. The region is also of great historical interest due to evidence of very early human life living there. Ebbw Vale is also the hometown of Jade, and for you, Jade, we're travelling a few miles down the road from Ebbw Vale to AccessAstronomy to look at the story of Harold Jones. On the morning of Saturday, February the 5th, 1921, 8-year-old Frida Bernal was running an errand for her father to buy a poultry grit and spice at the local store. When she didn't return home as expected, her father went to the shop to see if she'd been there. The assistant behind the counter that day was 15-year-old Harold Jones, and he confirmed that Frida had been in and purchased the grit and spice. Fred searched the streets for his daughter for more than 6 hours before alerting the police. The local community went out in force to search for the little girl, but found nothing. But the next morning, at around 7 AM, a collier worker saw what he thought was a bundle of rags. When he approached the bundle, he realised it was the body of a young girl. The body was quickly identified as little Frida, and it was clear she'd been the victim of a brutal attack. Doctors revealed that she had died sometime in the morning of the previous day. Scotland Yard police were sent down from London to try and track down the killer, and within days the shop assistant Harold Jones had been arrested and charged with murder. A witness claimed to have heard screams coming from a shed used by Mortimer's corn stores where Harold worked. And even more damningly was that Frida's handkerchief and an axe were also found in the shed that only Harold had the key to. Jones strenuously denied he was responsible, and despite the weight of circumstantial evidence against him, he was acquitted at his trial on June 21, 1921, and was welcomed home by the AccessAstronomy community, who never doubted his innocence. However, just 17 days after his acquittal, on July 8, 1921, Harold lured his neighbour, 11-year-old Florrie Little, into his house after watching her play hopscotch in the streets outside. Once she was inside, he partially strangled her and dragged her into the kitchen, where he beat her with a plank of wood and cut her throat with his father's pocket knife. He then wrapped her remains in clothing and concealed them in the attic of the home he lived in with his parents before cleaning up. When it was realised Florrie was missing, Harold, along with the rest of the community, assisted in the search to find her. However, when police started to conduct house-to-house searches, they discovered Flory after Harold's father let the police in to search their home. And it was his father who hunted his son down and apprehended him on the streets of Abertillery. This time Harold was convicted, and he admitted to the killings. He gave the reason for the murders as a desire to kill, but because he was still 2 months short of his 16th birthday, he escaped the hangman's noose and was sentenced to life in prison. Harold served 20 years before being released on parole on the 6th of December 1941 at the age of 35. He joined the Merchant Navy and after the war moved to Fulham, London, using the alias Harry Stevens. He later married and had a daughter. Harold died of bone cancer on the 2nd of January 1971, but before he died, he told his wife the name Harold Jones should be written on his death certificate. It is not known if she was aware of his crimes, but his daughter certainly wasn't, and didn't find out until many years after his death. Over the years, many investigators believe Harold carried on killing after his release, and he is implicated in the Jack the Stripper killings, a series of murders of prostitutes committed between 1964 and 1965 in West London, although nothing has been conclusively proven. The 2 little girls Harold murdered are buried in Brunethel Cemetery, and recently their graves were restored after they fell into disrepair. So that's it for this episode of Too Close to Home. We hope you enjoyed, and we'd like to say a huge thank you to Mitchell, Tiffany, Jade, Dan and A. Thank you for your incredible support on Patreon, and we hope you've enjoyed this video. Again, if anyone wants their hometown featured in an episode of Too Close to Home, then be sure to check out Patreon in the link in the description or in the comments section below. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next video.